Welcome to the Marinade with Jason Earle. Our guest today is Lee Bains III of Lee Bains III and the Glorifiers. I believe Lee has made the most important record of 2017. His album Youth Detention, Nail My Feet to the Southside of Town reads like a series of essays on race, class, and our current political clusterfuck. I've spent hours listening to the songs and digesting them. It makes me feel like an extremely woke teenager sitting in my room, reading the lyric booklet while listening to the tunes at the same time. Go out and get it as soon as you finish listening to this conversation. Lee and I first met at a show he played at the now-defunct Burro Bar in Jacksonville, Florida. It was after the 2015 Florida-Georgia football game, and I brought a handful of sun-whipped, half-drunk friends for a long-anticipated set. Lee graciously spent about an hour talking football, the school-to-prison pipeline, and a bunch of other topics with me that night, before he even went on and played. He was down to earth and engaging, and I knew he would have to be on the Marinade the next time they came around. We caught up recently before his set at Will's Pub in Orlando, Florida. Lee once again was a pleasure, and I'm so grateful for his thoughtfulness. Ladies and gentlemen, Lee Bains III enters the Marinade. Cheers, y'all. Yeah, I am. I mean, let's definitely get into it at some point.
Yeah. Nice.
No, it's all good. I mean, I like the natural banner beforehand, man. Every year I say I'm not gonna do it anymore.
Oh, really?
You know, I do. Like I say I'm not gonna do it, and then honestly, every year I'll say like that I'm gonna I'm gonna go, I'm gonna see my friends.
Right.
I'm gonna have a good time, you know. And I'm not gonna sweat it, you know, I'm not gonna worry about it. I'm not gonna actually go to the game.
Right.
Every year and I'm going to the game. Every damn year, man. I end up just and then I sit here and I write this shit about how how it's a plantation mentality and how I'm perpetuating the oppression of young black men, and I fucking do it again the next year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember talking about that in Jacksonville last time. Yeah. But it's like, I don't know. I mean, to me, there's nothing wrong with the game of football or you know what I mean? Or and I know that you don't think there is either. But
right. You might need to get closer. Sorry. Okay. I want to take it out there.
But I guess, the problem, at least my problem with it is basically that these guys aren't getting paid. You know what I mean? And that's a primary problem with college athletics is they're these workers who are making millions or, billions for these entities and aren't making a dime off of it. They're it's just free labor basically. Yeah. I mean, that's to me the first but it's I don't know. To me, I guess it's if you're a real fan of the team, you know what I mean? You should want those guys compensated. You know what I mean? If you're a fan of the work that these workers do, then you should want them to be, compensated.
Yeah,
for
but
it.
I mean, the counter argument though I think is fairly strong, which is that they're compensated in the sense that they have national exposure, they have the opportunity to, not all of them obviously, but
right.
The big time players, especially at the big time programs, have the opportunity to make lots and lots of money down the line, and ostensibly they're getting an education.
Right.
Now, there's the big question.
Right. What kind of education are they getting? Yeah. And to me, it's this would have been a totally different conversation and was a different conversation 100 years ago. When this was truly amateur athletics and it was just a bunch of students and townsfolk, gathering on the green to watch the guys throw around the pigskin or whatever. Yeah. But these guys are out here putting their bodies on the line for a group of people to make just mountains of money. You know what I mean? And they are making mountains of money off these guys, off putting their damn names on jerseys that they sell to people, and these guys don't get a dime of it. You know what I mean?
But that point you made about the 100 years ago, it would have been the townsfolk gathering together. That's how I justify it.
Right.
You know, that's how I end up sleeping okay at night. Whether that's just purely delusional on my part or not, that's how I get myself up and go to that game. That's how I'm going to Florida, Georgia Saturday.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Is that community aspect of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I mean, which is why I think, certainly a big part of why I love it, too. You know, I think a lot of us do. And why sports, I think sports are important, you know, and like they are moments where there's an opportunity for a sporting event, or for watching a game at a bar, or for striking up conversations to be this like moment of transcendence, you know what I mean, in a community or in a place, like across all sorts of lines, you know,
right?
What I mean? Which is powerful. Like,
it's incredibly powerful. Agreed. And some of that stuff comes through. Well, there's two parallels there, right? So you write a lot about race and class, and this new record. I don't know how to speak on it other than in hyperbole. Like I really do, Lee. I think you've made the best, most important record of this year.
Thanks, man.
I really do.
Thank you.
And it's hard because there's so much.
Right. There's a lot to it.
Like I told you, I've been spending a lot of time with it, and I'm still not even scratching the surface. It's almost like a really important series of essays. You know, and there's that theme of education. I mean, the record's called Youth Detention.
Yeah. That
theme of education comes through. What kind of headspace were you in? What were you consuming? What were you doing when you were writing this? What did that look like?
Damn. Well, thanks for all those observations and like thoughts on that. I guess I started writing these songs as I was. I guess maybe the moment, like if I had to like name a moment that really got me thinking about this record and the concept behind it, was when Michael Brown was shot.
Oh, wow.
And I, with, you know, many thousands of people, like went to downtown Atlanta where people were just, you know, gathering to protest the shooting, to protest the, you know, simmering miscarriage of justice, you know, where the cop was getting off. And I guess like what struck me about the Michael Brown story was he was a kid that on paper looked a lot like I did at that age. You know what I mean? He was a kid who had, you know, struggled in school, who'd, you know, had like bright spots and then had struggles, who'd, you know, had these kind of brushes with authority, you know, and all that kind of stuff. Who was a teenage kid. You know what I mean? And I had, you know, problems in school. I had problems with the law as a teenager. And I don't think it ever occurred to me that I might wind up shot by a cop because of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And
shit. I looked at this kid and his situation, and I was like, man, I had a much worse track record at his age than he did. You know what I mean? And that's just not something that I had to worry about, and that all had to do with race and class. You know what I mean? And then it just got me thinking. You know, I mean, I don't know of any kids that I grew up with who have been killed by the police, but I certainly thought about kids I grew up with and the ways that their awareness of those realities, you know, in the way that class and race worked to disempower them, as it did to empower me, how I kind of saw that play out, you know what I mean? And their in their lives, and so I guess maybe that's sort of the moment that kind of triggered me to, start thinking about this stuff, like and writing about it. And then I guess I read a bunch of books around that time that had to do with the sort of formation of self through like youth and adolescence and all that, like Midnight Children, the Salman Rushdie novel, and The Tin Drum by Gunter Grass, and trying to think of some others that I was
How'd you end
reading
up with
around that
those
time.
specifically?
I don't. Midnight's Children I'd read about 10 years ago, and it just always kind of stuck with me, and his way of writing about place and like urbanity and culture, and I guess like sort of intersectional idea of identity, is identity as being like really complicated and experiential, and so I guess that's kind of what drew me to that. And then I'd read him say that Tin Drum had like influenced his writing of Midnight's Children, so but anyway, so those are sort of I remember reading those books like as I was writing this, I was reading Angela Davis, a lot of her essays at the time as well, and like dealing with like the prison industrial complex. And, so that was some of the stuff I was reading at the time.
Yeah. You ever get into Ta-Nehisi Coates?
Yeah, that's another book that I read right around that. Yeah, thank you for. Yeah, that's another one that Between the World and Me is like is something else that I read right in that same time.
Because that seems like, I mean, a lot of the stuff I've just spent some time listening. I was like really digesting and listening, and then I spent some time reading the lyrics, and that's a really cool thing. Like folks can go to theglorifiers.com, and then all your lyrics are there, which I think is really important. Because one of the things that I told you the last time we met that frustrates me sometimes is that your music is so intense and so loud,
right?
And some of it's just whizzing by me.
Sure,
you know what I mean? Like I love that. I want both.
Right.
It's this catch-22 where I'm like, damn it, I want to hear exactly what he's saying.
Right.
But at the same time, I appreciate that you're rocking out.
Nice.
So that's kind of a tough thing. Yeah. Look at those lyrics on the page, man, and like. I mean, you have a song called Commencement Address for the Deindustrialized Dispersion.
Yes.
Which sounds like it's straight out of a Ta-Nehisi Coates article, right? It sounds like something straight out of something he would write in the Atlantic.
That's awesome.
On the record, there's like, so there's a couple of things that I don't feel like you did as much in the past with production. Like there's the part where you've got on Crooked Letters, the chanting.
Yes.
How'd that come about?
Well, I guess that that song is trying to talk about like the problems with language and its frailties, and so I guess I kind of visualize that as being is these crooked letters, they're not being linear in their creation of meaning, in that like one word can signify a multitude of things, you know what I mean? And context and culture and a point and place and time has a lot to do with that, So anyway, that's kind of what the song's about, and that image of a crooked letter, like I got from that children's rhyme, that I heard growing up, and so thought about like, because something that I tried to talk about on the record is is that notion of language and its shortcomings, I guess, and like the ways that language and words are symbols, and that they're the way that they symbolize or signify or whatever is not as indelible and essential as like we're taught to think about them. You know what I mean? And so they're like these poets, the objectivist poets that I was also reading at this time, like, and their way of looking at language as an object. I guess that's where they got their name from. And so I was thinking about that and trying to play with that in the record. Like the song "Sweet Disorder," for instance, there are a couple lines where, and this is a total like objectivist thing, where they would like take a word or a line of poetry and then take the letters from that line and like jumble them around to create a new line or like another word. So that's like the title of the album is like that, Youth Detention, and then the subtitle, Nail My Feet Down to the Southside of Town, use the same letters like in a reconfigured thing. And there are a couple lines in Sweet Disorder where do that same thing. And so Crooked Letters had me thinking like there's something, so like one aspect of language that we forget when we look at it as this like it's like a code, a specific code, is that we, I think, forget the artfulness of it and the musicality of it, you know what I mean? And like, so that's why like that, I guess I took that chant with me and thought about like even devoid of its supposed meaning, which is like teach a kid how to spell a word. There's so much of the meaning of that is in its cadence, and in its sound, and like that's what's meaningful about it, or at least what kind of drove it home for me was the sound of it, as a kid. So anyway, so that was kind of my thought behind that sample thing, the loop thing.
It's great that you said that about the fact that you were consuming a lot of poetry at the time, because that's something that comes out really clearly. I mean that, cool. And I think it's interesting. Like there's a couple of things when you look at Whitewash, when you look at the chorus of the song Whitewash on a page.
Yes.
And so I don't want to be a whitewash. I don't want to be an absence. First of all, what a great fucking song.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
I don't want to be the great silence. I don't want to be. And when you hear it, it conveys a different thing than when you look at it.
Okay.
You know, and in both there's value to both, right? So when you hear it, there's that melody to it, and then when you look at it, like that, the absence is physically stark on the page on that last line. I don't want to be. And there's that hyphen.
Right.
And so, sonically, it's there, but there's music, right? So it's not as stark. When you look at it written, it's so stark. And then that concept of whitewash, that absence is physically present.
Cool.
Oh, man.
Thank you for... Yeah.
Yeah, this may just end up me
thanks for digging
writing,
into it, man. No, because I'm
reading your lyrics back to you.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Because I really appreciate your spending the time with them.
Well, the other thing that really hit me was, there's the song, and is it Underneath the Sheets of White Noise that talks about the girl in class?
Yep.
Is that the one? Yeah. So the lyric goes, her objections are inspired, literate, brilliant. In her cutting cadence, in her north side drawl, when Miss England cuts her off, saying, "Girl, you're just too loud." She has bowed her braided, beaded head back toward her notes, but I can sense her shoulders slightly shake. I can hear the tears tapping on the page. I can see the ink begin to cloud. That imagery, man. It's so painful. It's so beautiful and so painful.
How is it what kind of pain does that bring?
Because the image in my head, and I work in social justice, basically, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm careful about it on the air,
I
so
see.
I
I
coded
gotcha.
a little bit, and I'll tell you in more detail later.
Well, that's why I was asking. 'Cause
Yeah.
but yeah.
But that's why it hits me, right? Because I'm
Right.
picturing this young black girl sitting in class and this white teacher who misinterprets the girl's volume level, misinterprets the way that she speaks,
Right.
the words that she uses as defiance or as ignorance or as a
Right.
lack of intelligence, and I see it all too often.
I bet.
And I'm sure you encounter it and have clearly thought a lot about that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean that's something that I definitely saw growing up, and I thought that there were definitely instances of. I think it's a lack of. Well, I think for one, it's like a lack of. I don't even know what you'd call it, like social literacy or something. You know what I mean? Like, but I think too, it speaks to this idea of like the whitewash, which is like this idea that there is a correct way of being culturally in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I, in various environments growing up and to this day, at work, various work environments, see that playing out, that people in positions of authority, generally who are white, are project their own sort of biases or ignorance onto the way people act or speak. You know what I mean? And it's something that is is endemic. You know what I mean? And there are plenty of people who I think would think of themselves as progressive or enlightened to participate in that.
Well,
same
all right,
kind of
confession
thing,
time, right? So one of the things that I struggle with is that I grew up in an environment where, even though I grew up in Kentucky and Central Florida.
Right.
Okay, so I grew up pretty in the South.
Yeah.
Very segregated places that I lived, and I think there are certain norms that as I grew older I let go of, right? So there's certain things that I went, oh, man, that was racist, or that was insensitive, or that was whatever it was, and I let go of those things, and I didn't expect that out of other people. But there are certain things I noticed that I hold on to.
Yeah.
So that's why that line about where Miss England says, "Girl, you're just too loud."
Right.
That's one thing that sometimes I struggle with in public.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily black or white, but it tends to play out that way. Sometimes it's just a class thing. Sometimes it's just an environmental thing.
Right.
I just get real annoyed with people that are loud.
Right.
And I realize, that I think that's a tough question. Like, am I projecting my culture onto them, my expectations onto them,
Right.
or are there certain norms that we have as an American society sort of agreed upon that, like, hey, in this space you're not going to be loud? I don't have an answer. I just know that, like, that a line like that and a thought like that hits me a lot because I find myself judging people based on those kinds of norms. You know?
Yeah. And I guess we all do. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, I think about when I moved to New York for college, and I was there, first moved there. There are ways that I was taught to interact with people in public,
Yeah.
And, you smile and nod at people, or you say, hey, how you doing? Thank you. Things like that.
Eye contact when you're speaking to someone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. And I realized when I was up there, like when I first moved up there and I'd go into a store, to buy a pack of cigarettes or something, and I'd say, hey, how you doing? And they would just like stare blankly at me. I would sit there and think, oh, what the hell is wrong with these people? You know what I mean? These assholes.
Yeah.
And it's like, over time being there, I came to realize, because there were some people that I would run into that would treat me in this way where I was like, this person is disrespecting me, they're being an asshole.
Yeah.
And then I'd get to know them a little bit, and then I realized, no, they're a cool person.
Yeah.
It's just that's not what they weren't raised with the same sorts of, social ideals, or
Right.
ideals for social interaction that I was. That doesn't really say anything about them except where they're from and the way they're raised. That doesn't, so over time I realized that people in New York aren't assholes. They're some of the friendly, some of the best people you'll meet, but they just, have a different way of acting in public. You know what I mean? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just how they do it. You know what I mean? And but that initial feeling was like it just brought back all those things I always heard, like, they're just rude and and all that kind of stuff. And it's like but my part in that is that I was assuming a motive or assuming intent, and like labeling their actions with those things, when I honestly didn't understand. I just moved to this place, I didn't know anything about it, and it was up to me to kind of learn what's going on, what's the lay of the land. You know what I mean?
And then either decide that you're gonna be okay with it, or you're gonna be miserable and continue to project.
Yeah, totally.
So you project onto them.
Yeah.
I lived in Holland for about 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And those motherfuckers will just like brush right past you and not say excuse me, and but they're wonderful people.
Sure,
it's
of
just
course.
it's just like a thing that took me
that
so
if you
long.
did right, I mean, if somebody does that to you in whatever in Birmingham, then they're messing with you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That is a fuck you, basically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that's not what that means in a lot of places. And
Yeah.
there's nothing, that neither is right or wrong. It's,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. What are you gonna? So you got 17 songs on this new record.
Yeah.
What have you been playing on the road?
We've been playing almost all of them. Intermittent, you know what I mean? Not every night, but kind of mix it up night to night. But we've played almost all of them. There are a couple. There's one that I just did by myself on the record, "Picture of a Man," that we haven't played live, and I'm trying to think, but I feel like maybe all the rest of them we've played at least once or twice.
Do you, when you sit down, is the set list process a creative process for you guys, or does
Man,
it
it's
just,
not really
yeah.
unfortunate. Well,
Not necessarily
I wouldn't say it, but we do kind of we do talk about it in a general way, but a lot of it's decided kind of in the moment. Like somebody will just like yell out a song kind of thing. So we never like write out a set list unless maybe we are like restricted on time or something weird. You know what I mean? If it's something like unusual, like if we're doing like a video session or something, we might do that. But like for a normal show, like we never write down a set list or anything.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
When you're out, like what if are there specific things that that fans typically are like really needing to hear when you're playing, or?
Man, I don't know. I've been like trying to listen, like if people want to hear a certain song.
Yeah.
Like trying to encourage people to say, because like we're down to play whatever. They're all our songs. We're down to play whatever. So if we can do it, if we remember how to play it or whatever, But it doesn't seem like. I mean, I will say that song "Crooked Letters" several people had asked for because like we weren't playing it for a while, but then like people would be like, "Man, I like that song. I was hoping y'all would play that." So then we have played it. Good. And anytime somebody asks for it, we for sure play it. But so yeah, but I can't think of a particular one that people are. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That one of the things that I like about following you on social media is that when you're playing a gig, it seems like you're really paying attention to it's conveyed through your social media that you're watching those openers. You're catching different bands. Has there anybody recently, maybe on this run, that's like you just been like, God, y'all have to hear
so good.
this band?
Man, there have been a ton. I was thinking about that earlier today. Like, we're so lucky to have met all these awesome bands. I'm trying to think of some on this last run. There's a band in Virginia that we've played with several times in Harrisonburg, Virginia, called Azores. There's a great band, and they get better like we've probably played with them a few times, and every time we do, there's like better and better. But they're really smart songs, like kind of super chunky Archers of Loaf type thing, but like with like a real strong like Replacements vibe, and just great songs. Trying to think of some more bands on this run of shows. This band E-Meters from Oxford, Mississippi, that are really great. We've played with a bunch of times.
What's it like playing Oxford?
Man, it's interesting. It was
especially with some of the things that you talk about.
Exactly, yeah. That's well, you know, it's weird, man. It's like Oxford is such a, particularly with all these conversations right now around like Confederate imagery and all that.
They just changed their mascot again. Did you see that?
Yeah, but it's still the rebels. It's like,
rebels.
who cares? Like, that's not the problem.
Yeah.
The land shark or the bear thing. Like, nobody gives a shit about that.
Yeah.
It's like, what are y'all doing?
It's like, it's insulting.
It's
really,
insulting.
You know, like,
it's insulting.
Like, really, we don't see through that.
Right.
Come on, y'all.
Come on. But you know, I don't know, dude. Oxford is such a. It's a. Because it's like, on the one hand, you have the Ole Miss Rebels, and they're, you know, at least until a few years ago, there's fucking rebel flag was their sort of, you know, symbol, their team.
Johnny fucking Reb.
Yeah. So of course you have that element, and you have the fact that it is a very, I would say, of all the universities in Mississippi, it has the sort of most sort of white aristocratic kind of association with it, you know, whereas like, you know, Southern Miss and Mississippi State don't have all that sort of like trappings.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, it's like Ole Miss is home to, you know, or Oxford, I should say, is home to William Faulkner, you know, and it's home to Barry Hannah. It's, they had Kiese Lehman there as a writer in residence, and they've championed Jesmond Ward and like all these like, you know, Mississippi writers and thinkers who really have challenged that you know, white supremacy or the sort of aristocratic social order, you know. And then you have like the Center for Southern Studies there that's done a lot of great work to that end as well. And definitely tries to turn like a critical eye back inward on the South, you know. So it's I don't know, like it's weird. Like we play this bar that we usually play in Oxford. It's a great place, and I watched the Auburn game, LSU game, sadly at this place. And
yeah, but you're having an okay year.
It's all right, man. It's frustrating.
Yeah, I know.
It's just frustrating.
I'm a Gator fan, man. I don't.
Well, I mean, y'all, that's the whole. Yeah, that's the whole.
Yeah. So anyway, you're watching the. Sorry,
yeah, but I was watching the game, and like with the game day crowd and everything, and because Ole Miss was playing Vanderbilt, I think, in Oxford. But anyway, you know, you're like, I was definitely walking around the square, and I was like, man, this feels a little weird, you know, a little, you know, thinking about like, well, we're gonna play a show, and I'm gonna talk about, you know, wanting to take down the Confederate monuments, talking about, you know, class struggle and xenophobia or whatever it is. I was like, this is going to be a little weird, you know?
Yeah.
But then it's like all those folks go,
Pass
when the
out
game's
somewhere.
over, they go wherever they go.
Yeah.
And it's like, and the bar gets filled with like some of the coolest, smartest people I know. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
And who are, almost all from most everybody there we know are, from the South, and are obviously, they obviously love the South. They're choosing to live in Mississippi. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they also are all pushing to change it.
Well, and I
change
think,
it,
and that's the
govern
misconception
ourselves.
that a lot of folks outside of the South, unfortunately, have is that places like Oxford are just backwards and racist. Like
Right.
there's definitely a stereotype that
For
we
sure.
fight against all the time.
Yep.
Every town has good folks and not so good folks. We happen to have a bunch of towns with some really nasty histories,
Right.
in our backyard. But at the same time, you're going to find, I mentioned the Dutch earlier. You're going to find incredibly deep racism
Sure.
in Holland, for example.
I bet, yeah.
Not a place that you think of necessarily right off the bat. You're going to think about Alabama or Georgia or South Carolina before you're going to think about there.
Right.
But some of the worst xenophobia and racism that I've encountered happened there.
Right.
I saw there.
And that's I guess, Europe is where that came from. That's
Right.
where it came from, and that's yeah, the British and the Dutch and the Spanish and the French started all these slave colonies and killed a bunch of indigenous people, and like that's
I wish I had Twitter pulled up. You and I had a Twitter exchange about this.
Yeah.
A couple months
Did
ago.
we really? Yeah,
I wish I had it in front of me. We
nice.
talked about this
talked
very
about the same
thing. Yeah.
But it's yeah, and I think right now it's like maybe the U.S. as a whole is starting to kind of awaken to the fact that you can't just use the South as your whipping boy. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, when Michael Brown got shot in St. Louis, and Freddie Gray in Baltimore and Eric Garner in New York, Philando Castile in Minnesota. You know what I'm saying? This is
yeah.
not a, this is that is what this country was built on. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's what it was built on, and it's like, it's up to us to try and undo that. You know what I mean? And empower people that we've disempowered for so long. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and that's not just it's like, and I think a lot of the reasons that, there were so many lynchings in Alabama and South Carolina and Georgia and Florida and all these places, and the reason that Jim Crow existed, and the reason that, there's been so much sort of overt school segregation and all that, is that these are the blackest states in the union.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If 30% of Minnesota was black, I have a feeling you'd be seeing it there too.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, I don't know. It's like maybe folks in other parts of the country are starting to see themselves as being involved as well.
I hope so, because they have to,
Yeah.
right? So like we can't move forward if everyone doesn't own their own bit of the responsibility,
Right.
And if we don't all make a concerted effort to do those things, to do the thing, whatever it is that we have, right,
Mm-hmm.
within our power. So for you, it's music, and I hope a book maybe or some articles. Is that coming? Any
I've
chance?
thought about it, man.
You
I
ought
work
to,
on
Lee.
stuff. Yeah.
You ought to play around with it at least, because you have so much to say and you say it so beautifully.
Thanks, man.
It would be
That
really
means a
cool.
lot.
Just, if nothing else, giving it a shot, and
Yeah.
if you write it and it's not any good, you throw it away. And you've gone through that process. You know how much
Yeah.
shit's in here that just sucks. In my notebook.
Oh man, yeah, you should see my songwriting.
Yeah, how much did you
That
throw
so-
away from
so
the most
much,
recent
man.
record? You ended up
So
with
much.
all this great stuff, but you had
Oh,
to have
thanks. Oh,
tossed
yeah,
a bunch.
Tossed a lot,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, to work on the lyrics in particular for this record, like I was working a job at the time where I basically got my schedule down to 4 days. I was working 4 days a week, and then Fridays I was just getting up like I was going to work, and then I just sit down and just work on these songs like till my wife got home from
Damn.
her job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was just like, I'm just gonna every Friday. I think it was Friday. I'm just gonna do this. This is gonna be my job all fucking day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
That's
then other
great.
times where I could catch, catch as
Sure.
catch can. But yeah, I mean, I wrote and rewrote and all that. And one of my really good friends is a fiction writer, actually, and like he and I send him songs and like we kind of workshop them, and I did the same for his novel that he actually just found out it's getting published in June, which is like
Cool.
which is
Can you
really
talk?
exciting.
Can you talk about it? Can you say his name or
Yeah,
anything?
his name's Caleb Johnson is his
Cool.
name. It's called Alberta. Or no, I'm sorry, it's called Treeborn is the name of the novel.
Nice.
Alberta was the working title, but yeah, he's a buddy from Alabama, and it's an amazing novel. But yeah, that was like, I guess that was going on as I was writing this record too. It's like I was writing this and he was writing that,
cool.
and we're sending
Yeah.
them back and forth. And
That's so
stuff.
healthy.
So yeah.
People don't have that. Not everybody. I mean,
I feel very grateful
Yeah.
to have that relationship with him. And
yeah.
yeah.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, it's cool. And, yeah, I think when he puts it out, like he'll do like a book tour or whatever, and I think we're gonna do some shows where like I'll play some songs by myself, like he does a reading and stuff like. Yeah, I think it'll be cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think it'll be cool. But,
Man, you have done more than I could have expected. We're over what I normally go. That
no.
was quick.
Sorry.
No, I want more, but I know you have shit to do.
Yeah, well,
you have a show to play.
I did see somebody called, but it might not have been them.
Do you know what time you're going on?
It wasn't them. Man, we're playing last, so I think it'll be a while.
That bums me. I mean, I got to get up early. I really want to stick around for the set, but
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it because my body is just like, I got a full day tomorrow of social justice.
I hear you, man. Yeah, I'm not sure what. I don't know. Well, I'll check when we get back over there. But
that'd be cool.
I know there are a bunch of everybody's heading down to the fest in Gainesville. So
Oh, that's right. You guys are playing Fest as
yeah,
well,
on
right?
Saturday, yeah.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Yeah, it'll be great. I'm excited about that. That band Against Me is playing their first record, which is like the first time I saw them was on that tour.
Oh, that's so cool.
That just kind of changed my life,
Really?
So that'll be cool to see them play that.
The show or the record or both?
The show and the record, yeah.
Yeah.
The show's the first. I'd heard that album like in a friend's car, like at a party or something, but I didn't have it before I went to the show. And then just being at that show is just mind blowing, Yeah. And then I got the record and they're and saw them many times after that. But that was like the moment that got me. That was kind of a big moment for me, was seeing them on that tour. And
have you ever gotten to tell them that?
I have, yes. I've never met Laura Jane, but I sent her an email about it. It was just telling her like how much that meant, like that show meant, those first shows where I saw him. Because we were in Birmingham, which isn't, there was a great scene there, but you don't. You think like Birmingham, Alabama, isn't a place that people are like beating down the doors to play in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But Against Me came through and played, and their original bass player is actually from Huntsville, Alabama, and but so anyway, but yeah, there were a bunch of bands from Gainesville and Richmond who had like come through Birmingham, and that I felt like that kind of tied us into what was happening in the world, and but a lot of those bands are like we're involved with the fest and all that, so so it's cool to go down there and see them play that record.
That's really exciting, man.
That'd be pretty rad.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that'd be rad.
What in particular spoke to you about that record? What was it?
Well, I think the show, it was just it sounded so I just related to the way it sounded because it was like real. It was fast and like rowdy and people were yelling, but it was also like really melodic and like twangy and
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
It was there's definitely some anger in there, but it was like a joyful sort of anger, and like there was this and it was just baked into the songs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then the records had this way of like being extremely political but also extremely personal, which just kind of just cracked my head open, like how'd you do that? How did you bring something like global capitalism and sweatshop labor into your friend's room in their house that they're living with people in?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, how
Yeah.
did you do that? And like,
Yeah.
I'm in here, in your friend's room with you, or like at this house party, and you've brought in all of these, huge systems that now make sense. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And like, I don't know. There's also, I don't know, like, I think that was a big part of it, and they didn't sound like, there were all these kind of like types like of music and the kind of DIY punk scene as I was exposed to it. Like there was this type of band and this type of band and this type of band, and like Against Me didn't really sound like any of it.
Yeah.
Like there it.
I never went through like a punk phase, right? Like it, for whatever reason, it trickled into my life later. It wasn't like a teenage thing or whatever. It just sort of came into my life later. And the only two bands at the time that I probably should have been into punk music, right. were Against Me and Avail.
Oh, and Avail was another band who did that for me too, yeah.
Same kind of thing you were just talking about.
Yeah,
they made it really accessible. It felt like something that I kind of wanted to understand, and I felt like I understood some of it.
Yeah.
Even though I wasn't getting those other punk bands, I was getting Avail, and I was getting Against Me, you know?
Yeah,
and I guess...
Yeah, and it was like all those bands, it was like them and Hot Water Music, also from Gainesville, and band like Strike Anywhere from Richmond, Amberetta from Richmond, This Bike is a Pipe Bombs, like... Grab Ass Charleston's. There are all these bands that just felt like I don't think I necessarily knew that it was. Well, I guess I did in some sense feel like they were southern. They were southern in a way that I related to, like, and because a lot of the punk that I was exposed to, I was like, man, it's cool, but there's something about it that makes me feel like I'm kind of I don't really get this. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's cool, but it's not really me. Like, I'm kind of being a poser.
Exactly.
If I were to play in a band like that, I'd be kind of being a poser. Yeah. But it's like I hear Avail or Against Me or Hot Water Music or these bands, I'm just like, yes, that sounds like where I live and my friends, and that's what punk sounds like to me and feels like. Is like, sure, it was serious at times, but there was also just such a sense of like, I don't know, like joyfulness to it and like openness, where there wasn't, I don't know, it's just like this feeling like we're all kind of shitheads. You know what I mean? Which I related. It's like, you can be a shithead here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And,
safe place to be a shithead.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And that felt comfortable and familiar, but like really exciting. And, that was a cool thing to kind of have going on, and the fact that like I said, all those bands were playing in Birmingham, but, on a Tuesday night or whatever, whatever it was, so.
That's great, man. Well, Lee, man, thank you so much. Thank you for your new record. Dude. Thank you so much for being here in Orlando. wish y'all could make it around more often. I'm sure everybody says that, but it'd be cool if you guys can make it more often. I'm gonna try to stay up. We'll see.
I think you can do it. We'll
You're
see.
gonna handle it. All right. Thanks so
All right.
much, man.
Thanks,
I
dude.
appreciate you.
it.
Thank you so much for listening. Lee Bains III of Lee Bains III and the Glorifiers, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to Lee for sitting down and being so thoughtful. Thank you to all of you for listening. Thank you so much to Don Giovanni Records for making this happen. Youth Detention is out now, and it's wonderful, and it's beautiful, and it's painful, and it's an incredible piece of art that I highly encourage you to go out and get and listen to. Go find us on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Marinade Podcast or Marinade_podcast. Send us an email, marinadepodcast@gmail.com, and let us know what you think. Please give us a rating if you like what we're doing. We're over on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. We're pretty much anywhere that you can consume podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. The song that you heard at the beginning is Crooked Letters off of Youth Detention, and the one that you hear right now that I'm going to get out of the way of and turn it up is Whitewash that Lee and I discussed during the interview. Thank you so much. Cheers, y'all.
Landlord of